Welcome to The Art of Grant Writing, presented to you by Doolin Nonprofit Services. Doolin Nonprofit Services supports nonprofits anywhere in the U.S. with grant writing, training, and consulting, coaching and consulting. You can learn more about at Doolin Nonprofit Services at doolin.com. And I am Cheryl Smith, the CEO for Doolin Nonprofit Services. And you can learn more about me at either of these two locations or on LinkedIn. Before we get started, I have to have the screen here, you guys. There's a lot to cover with grant writing. I don't want you guys to be intimidated. I want you to sit back, relax, and just listen to what's being said. It's really important to just listen. I like to begin and end trainings with a thought, and our thought for today comes from Maya Angelou, who once said, "You may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated. In fact, it may be necessary to encounter the defeats so you can know who you are, what you can rise from, and how you can come out of it." I think that's really important, and particularly for the nonprofit, because you guys aren't out there generally bringing in income from just any, means, any way. You are a public charity, chances are, and you've got a purpose that you told the IRS that you would do. And so the way you earn money is it's restricted, it's challenging. And so you've got to know that there is a light at the end of this tunnel. Once you start to bring in funds, and hopefully this class today is going to help you do that, then it does get easier. You just can't give up. Today's learning objectives are pretty simple. We're going to define and understand the purpose of a grant proposal. We're going to describe the proposal sections. There's 8 key sections. And then we're going to understand why proposals are declined in the first place and what we can do about it. There's a few different types of grants. We're going to list the most common that you guys are probably most familiar with. So there are federal grants, and federal grants are not to be confused with federal contracts. To me, there's a big difference. When we think about a federal contract, that's a binding agreement between a buyer and a seller to provide goods or services in return for something, usually money. There's procedures that are laid out. It's very inflexible in terms of your scope of work and your budget. You have a lot of input from whoever is your sponsor, meaning the grantor. And the payment is based on your deliverables and milestones. It's very restrictive, but it's a great thing. But grants, federal grants, they are a flexible instrument designed to provide money to you to support the public somehow, something that the government needs you to do to support the public. The document is usually flexible, meaning that even if the government puts out an RFA, a request, RFP, request for proposal, then they're still going to ask you how you're going to do it. They're not telling you how, they're asking you how. So there's a little more flexibility in terms of the scope and the budget, because now you get to decide how much you need. And so there is a big difference. One is a little more flexible than the other. But I will tell you that with federal grants, they are, for the most part, when it comes to grants for nonprofits, because there's, different types of federal grants, mostly they're discretionary, meaning that it's competitive, and the government, this is an entitlement program. Government doesn't have to give you the grant. You're going to compete for it. There's always going to be reports, and then there's going to be matches. A match is where you have to put up a certain percentage of the money. So if they give you 100,000 and the match is 20%, then you need to find the other 20,000 that doesn't come from federal sources. They're very easy to identify. That's one of the reasons I do like federal grants. You can pretty much go to grants.gov and find, those ones there. State and local grants are also government grants, but and there's reports due, a lot of the same things you'll find with federal, except they're very challenging sometimes to identify. You literally have to just almost know somebody or know of the department that needs to fund you. You have to kind of know those things in advance. One of the cheats that I like to give for state grants, at least, is if you go to your state government's website and just put in the little search bar, funding opportunities. And that tends to work for me 9 times out of 10, where once I do that, then I'm able able to get a list of the different departments that's actually offering grants. And so those are the government grants. But then we have the non-governmental grants. We've got the corporate and the foundation. And so there can be corporate foundations, but that's not what I mean when I say corporate grants. What I mean is this grant came from a company, not their foundation, if they have one. And mostly these kinds of grants are, to improve that company's self image. They want to make sure that they're out there doing their social responsibility part. And you will very often find them asking, well, how are you going to recognize us if you're awarded? We do that too. We're a company. So I shouldn't laugh. We also do it. They're not always as easy to identify. And here's the reason. You can go to a company's website and see nothing. Like the bigger companies will have social responsibility sections and you'll be able to see what they fund. But the smaller companies don't necessarily do that. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to fund you. And so you just pretty much need to know who's in your area that you want to connect with and ask for funding because they get to use their bottom line any way they want. So just remember that when it comes to companies. With foundations, they're entirely different beasts. And the foundations they're 501c3 too, they're charity, but they're private, meaning they bring in their own money somehow, some way. And they're there to advance a cause that's near and dear to them. They're relatively easy to find, but the thing that you do need to know about foundations is they can change their cause whenever they want. There are some foundations that every year you're going to need to check that website because they'll highlight a different cause that they're interested in, and that's their prerogative. We are concentrating today on the private foundations. And so we're concentrating on what a proposal might look like for the private foundation. Now, we've been talking about grant, 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 grant. Let's really just define it. A grant is a conditional gift with strings attached, and it's conditional. People think that the grant is free money and that you never have to pay it back. And that isn't necessarily true. It's conditional because you've got strings that are attached, things that you've said you were going to do, things that you've been asked to do. So you've got deliverables, things you've got to deliver. And if you don't do that, then you may have to repay it. That could be something that happens to you. Hopefully it doesn't, but it could. And there's other ways that you might have to repay a grant if you mismanage the money, if you do some fraudulent things. And I know nobody on this call would do that. But those are other reasons why you need to repay that grant. And the biggest thing and the reason you guys are here, the biggest thing that I want to convey is that grants are typically dependent on the way you actually write, your quality of writing, your ability to communicate an idea that you have that's clearly and concisely written. And here's the thing, I used idea, but it's really not an idea. And I'll share that with you in a sec. We talk about communication. George Bernard Shaw once said that the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. I look at a lot of grants for a lot of people, and there will be a question from a foundation on the grant application that I tell you what, the nonprofit that completed the application thinks they have nailed it. And then when I look back and I see you haven't even scratched the surface, you haven't answered the question. See, because in your head, in mine too, so I get it because I'm passionate about what I do, just like you are. You've got all these moving pieces in your mind, and you know exactly what it is that you're wanting to say, and we're the direction of your organization, and then you start to write out your question. But if you're not aware, and this is what this class is going to help you do, if you're not aware, it's really easy to miss some things, thinking that somehow in your passion you've communicated it. But when the funder gets it, you're not in front of them and you haven't communicated in the way that you thought. And so therein lies the biggest issue usually with completing grant applications. It's not that you're not capable of doing it, it's not that you lack capacity, it's just that you didn't communicate what you're doing in a way that can be received by a funder. And so I mentioned the word idea, and I need to backtrack. So just kidding. A grant proposal is not an idea, y'all. It is a plan. And so when you put together a proposal, it's got to be very sequential. You're going to, and very organic and easy to follow. And so we're going to talk about that right now. When we think about a full proposal, and you all can take this particular course and not complete a full proposal. literally, you can actually complete a mini proposal from what we're going to learn today. Mini proposals like 5 pages, but the full proposal is usually like 10 to 40 pages, depending on who you're applying for funding from. I've done them that's been up to 150 pages. That wasn't that fun. It's a specific format. Usually funders, if they're requesting a proposal, they're going to give you some information in terms of how they want to receive it, the fonts that you should use, how much, the spacing should be. So there, it's very specific. And then there's usually attachments that's required. Your proposal is going to cover the what, who, where, when, how, and why of your foundation request, period. And so our sections of a grant proposal are these primary 8 plus your appendix. And so there's the organization history, statement of need, project description, target population, SMART goals, measurement and evaluation, sustainability, and then there's your budget. And then we mentioned attachments. So your appendix is where you may have your attachments if you're mailing it, or those PDFs that's ready to be uploaded if you're applying online. And so we're going to talk about each one of those sections. So are you ready? Because let's do it. Let's get started with your organization background. So when a funder asks you to tell them about you, the organization, I want you to put yourself in the framework of being in front of a future employer who's asking you to tell them about yourself. They're not asking you to say, hey, I'm Cheryl, I'm a Capricorn, I'm from Detroit, I love seafood. That's not what they're asking. They're asking you to convey to them how you are a match for their organization. That is no different than a potential funder reading your proposal for the first time. Your organizational background is you're going to describe to them things in terms of how you have the capacity, how you have the know how you are a match for the same priority that you share with them. And so this section should be brief overview of your organization that includes first sentence, y'all, legal status, your founded, and location. Then you'll talk about your mission and your benefactors, your accomplishments, and then your governance. And if you have time, meaning if you haven't like over talked, because we do that sometimes, we're human, then you can also bring in partners. But if you don't talk about partners here, then you'll definitely talk about partners in the project description section. And so let's get a good look at what this looks like. And I know this paragraph's like, wow, Cheryl, this is a lot to read. I'm going to read it. When I was live, I would ask for volunteers. I'm going to go ahead and read it because there's a purpose of this. When we take classes that are online, sometimes we just look at what's there and we kind of skim past it. But I want you all to hear me, because when it's time for you to submit this to a funder for yourselves, I want you to remember the things to include. And there's our grid up in the very top: legal status, mission and benefactors, accomplishments, and governance. So we're trying to accomplish that in our short paragraph. So here we go. Kids Are People, Inc. CAP is a 501c3 nonprofit organization established July 21, 2011, and located in DeKalb County, Georgia. CAP's mission is to provide safe and stable housing for homeless families in DeKalb County, Georgia. To accomplish its mission, CAP provides transitional housing along with the coordination of resources and supports for homeless families with minor children. CAP has a rich history of providing services that help disengaged individuals regain self sufficiency and thrive. Since inception, CAP has housed more than 300 families and provided housing resources and referrals for over 2,800 families. The organization is governed by a 7-member board of trustees. The board provides oversight responsibility for the activities of the organization, et cetera, et cetera. You see how we did that? We didn't mince words. We didn't go on for pages and pages. It wasn't about my family and things that the funder's not really asking me. It is really just the nitty gritty. I think that's a word. And so we want to make sure we convey that, because if you don't, your funder, I know you think they will, but they won't keep reading. They won't. And so the first sentence is always your legal status. And then you follow that up with your mission statement immediately. And then you want to talk about how you accomplish your mission and what that really means, AKA your services, right? One description, one sentence of services. And I can hear you guys, some of you who are very, very new and maybe haven't gotten off the ground quite yet, say, well, I don't have the inception piece. I don't have the accomplishments piece. And I will say, yes, you do. You absolutely do. This particular fictitious organization has served 300 families, but let's say you've just gotten started, then you'll say, since inception, we have formed a board made up of qualified individuals. We have established our partnerships within the community to ensure that anything that falls outside of our scopes, we're able to provide community linkages. You see that? So there's always something that you can say that you did since you started. And then you talk about your governance and how you're established. And so that is the organizational background. And so the quick rule of thumb is that it's going to have your location, legal status, and you're founded. You're going to include your mission statement, your accomplishments, and then your governance. And so that's pretty much it. When somebody asks, tell me about the organization, that's what they mean right there. Statement of need. It's also AKA referred to as problem statement. And so oftentimes people will take that to mean, for instance, if a funder said, well, what's the statement of need? Or why are you doing this? Why your organization exists. Many times you will mistake that question for what do you need? And then I've seen it written in applications time and again where I need a building, we really need a van and some staff. That isn't what this is asking. Statement of need is asking you to describe the unmet need in your community and how you, the organization, plans to solve that problem. In the statement of need, this is the second area because target population asked this too. But with the statement of need, this is the area where you're going to use research because you're going to provide evidence outside of your own anecdotal evidence and experience. You're going to provide outside evidence that this need is real. That is really important. You don't want to use words like, well, we believe, that kind of thing, because this is not the piece where you talk about what you believe. This is the piece that really gets into the history of what's been happening in your community and proving that that is a fact. This particular section establishes the entire framework for the rest of the proposal. It really does. You can't write about your statement of need and the problem that's unmet and then have a project that has nothing to do with what you wrote about. That doesn't flow and it won't work. And so just know that everything originates with what you said the problem was. And with a statement of need, because it's a little more entailed than just your organizational background, we're going to spend a little time here. Your first sentence is the problem. Let me tell you, I used to be a reviewer for funding for grants in one of my lives. And I wouldn't even read if I couldn't figure out what you were writing about. I couldn't. And so you want to immediately have the reader understand what this is going to be about. And then in the middle paragraphs, you're going to clarify the problem by defining both what is normal and abnormal, basically. And so the normal is your ideal state, and what's abnormal is obviously the problem. And then you're going to have a concluding paragraph, and that really is going to hone in on that pressing need or the cost of doing nothing. Because if you're writing to a foundation, remember, and the reason I spent the time up front describing what motivates these different funders, they're motivated by their cause. And if you're sharing with them that if we do nothing, that means their cause goes unmet. That's not okay with them either. And so you want to look at the current state, and that's the initial sentence. You're going to look at the ideal state, and that's what should be happening. And then you're going to look at what do we do if nothing is what happens if nothing is done. And so let's go ahead and look at it. We're looking for the problem, clarification, and stats, and then we're looking for the cost of doing nothing. And so we're going to keep with our fictitious organization, the CAP program. So here's their problem statement or statement of need. Homelessness is one of our nation's most misunderstood and perplexing social problems. The harsh truth is that a growing number of families with children in America are experiencing homelessness every day. The primary cause of homelessness is insufficient income and lack of affordable housing. Although safe and stable housing is a basic human need, in 2018, a report by the National Law Center on Homelessness and Poverty estimated that each year, nearly 3.5 million Americans sleep in shelters, transitional housing, and public places not meant for human habitation. And at least 7.4 million have lost their own homes and are doubled up with others due to economic necessity. In addition to social costs, a chronically homeless person costs taxpayers an average of $35,578 per person per year. Okay, you got that? You see what we just did? We broke it down. We just helped the funder understand this is real. And so the problem was stated up front. When this funder started to read, they knew we were getting ready to talk about what? Homelessness. They knew we were going to talk about that. And then we clarified. So we made a bold statement and then we back it up with stats because we said the cause is insufficient income. So we threw out something, but then we backed it up and we were able to say, hey, this is what's happening. And that's what you want to be able to do in your own problem statement. Now, your problem statement, if you're applying for funding online, this is probably all you're probably going to need, like a paragraph. If you're submitting a proposal, a written document, then you're probably going to have a much lengthier problem statement that's several paragraphs. When we write them, we go into pages because we want you to have all of your words and all of your research and all of your data. It's also very helpful to have data that is very current. And we're going to talk about research here in just a sec. And so, first, your statement of need should address these things. Your current state, remember that was exactly what was happening right now. Your ideal state, and before you get to that, you talk about the behavior of what's wrong, and then you talk about what's right. And I'm going to go back to show you guys where we did that, and then the cost of doing nothing. But let me show you because I don't think that I actually pointed that out. If you look right in here, we said what is normal, and we said here although safe and stable housing is a basic human need, that's what's normal, right? And so, in case you guys missed that, we talked about what was normal, the ideal state, and then the cost of doing nothing. And then what your organization's doing about it is also a plus. I didn't describe that here, but that is also something very wise to include a paragraph that says we recognize this issue in our community and this is what we're doing. Now, I wouldn't spend a lot of time about what you're doing in your statement of need because you're going to elaborate that on in your project description, but it's okay to actually say that in this area as well. And so when we think about proving the need, right? Think about using your resources. Right now, back when I was young, we had encyclopedias that came out once a year and we got them every December. And by the time we got them, it was already like 2 years old, right? In terms of the information. But now we have the internet. And I will tell you something, I am totally reliant. My daughter sent this. I hope Google never goes down. I only know maybe six, seven things on my own. And so when you consider proving your need, you want to look at, in this case, because we're talking about homelessness, you're going to look at the number of homeless people in the nation state or in your target area or all of the above. And then, you can cite that. Median income, it's homelessness. And we said income was a factor. So now we have to talk about income. We talked about they can't afford rent. So now we have to talk about cost of living. We talked about poverty. We talked about the impact. So everything you talk about, that's what you have to prove. And there is something to be said about research. All research has not been created equally. And so you want to make sure that you are using credible sources that's not dated back 20 years ago. If your particular project, your program has data available literally on the minute, like homelessness is almost like on the minute, then you want to use the most recent credible data you can find. If you are writing about something that isn't studied so well across the country and the government doesn't come out with research on it every 5 years or so, every 10 years, that's fine. You do your best, but you want to keep it as recent as possible and you want it to be credible. Let me tell you that I like Google and I also like Wikipedia. Now I don't use Wikipedia, but I like them. You can't use them either. Not not with your research if you're going to send in a proposal because people can change Wikipedia. So you want to use credible sources that come from, census, quick facts, youth.gov, info please. If you need demographics, this is the area for this where you're going to city data, the quick facts. I love a lot. But Area Vibe, sometimes you'll find things on these other demographic type sites that you are not going to find on the census. And so just spread the love, figure out which of these sites are best for your information research and use that. Google Scholar, Livability. So there's a lot of really good ones. I use Psychology Today a lot if I'm dealing with something that has to do with mental health issues because they're credible. Now, my all time favorite, you guys, is anything that the government puts out because usually it's something that they've gotten that's evidence based. It's been reviewed, and so it's usually very credible. And so I like that for that reason. Something that's not here that I really like when we're talking about homelessness is MIT has a cost of living calculator for every county in the nation, every state, every county in the nation. And I think some of the MSAs are there as well. And so when you use the MIT calculator, it will give you the cost of living for your area and it will break it down. This is how much childcare is. This is how much rent is, utilities are, transportation. This is what a person needs to earn if they want to live in this area. It really breaks down the nitty gritty of the details that you'll need if you're talking about poverty or homelessness or housing or anything in that area. Now, as we move along to our project description, I want you to know that this is your time. This is literally your time to shine with your organization. When you step to that podium and you start talking about this project description, I want you to just lay it all out there. You want that funder to have a great idea of what your project looks like on a daily basis. So you want to put them in the day in the life of your organization. You want to describe your activities step by step. Your project description is the section of the proposal that scored the highest by potential funders. And this is a truth. If there's a 100-point scale, this is probably worth 30 or 40 points by itself. Because even if you have a really great idea, remember, we said the proposal is a plan. And if you don't have a plan behind that idea, which is this description, then you are not going to be funded. And so your project description is the what the program does. If you find yourself writing because a funder has asked you to describe the project and you start writing about why, like, well, this is needed because, and so many children are this, and that's where you stop. Put down that pen. Project description is not the time for you to talk about why. It is only what. And I hope that helps you guys to stay focused. When you're talking about your program, you're talking about what the program does and how the program does it. You are not talking about why at all. The why was the need statement. The what and the how is your project description. And how is your methodology. So if you have a funder ask you, describe your methodology, that's just a big old fancy word for how. So how is the program going to implement these services and general activities each day? That's what they're asking from you. And so your project description includes your methodology that expands on what you do, how you do it, who is eligible, and who you partner with. And so if you are going to write your project description, this is what you want to use as your outline. Truly, you guys. And in this order. You want to do it in this order: what you do, how you do it, who is eligible, and who you're going to partner with. And as is our custom here in this training, let's go ahead and look at what that might look like using CAP. CAP is a DeKalb County nonprofit that alleviates homelessness through its operation of a 12-room transitional housing complex located at 124 Any Street, Lithonia, Georgia. In addition to housing, the program provides a coordination of resources, referrals, and support programs to aid hundreds of homeless family heads each year restore their self-sufficiency and become contributing members of society. The program currently houses 12 families, providing safe and stable housing for up to 24 months for adult males with minor children who fall into one or more of the following categories: homeless veterans, those who are disabled, those recently released from incarceration with no prior history of violent crime or crimes against children. Transitional housing at CAP requires an active participation from each adult male in working toward financial independence. We currently partner with the Atlanta Mission, Grady Hospital, Tapestry, DFACS, and the Department of Veteran Affairs for inbound referrals. Okay, and so you see what we just did. We really just broke down those 4 criteria for this project description. We talked about what we do. And so we said that we're a transitional housing complex. How do you do that? Well, we do that by housing families. Well, what families? Who's eligible? Homeless veterans with children. And who do you partner with? Glad you asked. We currently partner with Atlanta Mission, etc. And this is what you want your project description to look like. And so it's so much easier to do it this way because I will tell you, I'm a writer. You guys are getting ready to start writing. When you write, I don't know if you guys are guilty of this, but man, I can go on tangents. I will, before we know it, before we end this thing, I'll be talking about how to make good peanut butter cookies and everything else, right? And so if you have your outline, it keeps you focused. And use this. So as you're use it really if you're homeless, if you're homeless shelter, if that's what you do, but use this as your guide when you are creating your own. And so, your quick rule of thumb for your project description is that you're going to talk about where the program, oh, I'm sorry. I called this a quick rule of thumb, but this is what your project description can also include. So, forgive me. Your project description can include the things that we just shared. In addition, it can also include and should also include where your program takes place and your hours of operation, how people enroll in your services, and it can even include what you need. Now you can say that. And here's why. If you're a homeless shelter and you house, let's say you've got 10 people that you house, and you are now at capacity, this might be the area to say that the purpose of this proposal is because we need additional housing. So that's okay to say that. You've already proved why a long time ago. You're already talking about what you do. Now you're saying we need some more. We don't have enough. And that's okay to do that. And how your clients enroll in your services, you'll see this question presented usually this way: access. Funder might ask you, well, how does one access you? And what they mean is describe for us how a person finds you and how they enroll and receive your services. And they're usually asking, is there a cost? Right. And so you want to remember this quick rule of thumb that you can add these extra things. And if you don't put it in your proposal, you got to write it somewhere because chances are you're going to be asked these questions. Now, as we move along to our target population, and we're making really good time, we're going to have plenty of time to answer questions if you guys have questions. As we move along to our target population, one of the things that I love about the nonprofit community is, man, when you guys commit to your cause, you commit to this cause for everybody. The issue with that, when you're going after funding, is funders usually have defined areas. And even if they are a national funder, they're still looking for you to have defined areas too. And so, as much as you want to say, I serve the world, and one day you might, if today, you're not actually serving the world, then let's talk about who you actually do serve. Who's in your backyard, who's in your county, who's in your state, who can you put your hands on immediately? These are your primary people, the people that you know will regularly use or benefit from your services. And some of the mistakes that we make when we talk about our target population is thinking, if we tell a funder that we serve more, areas, that's going to make us look better, but it doesn't. It actually can be a detriment to you to do that. It's so much better to think big but start small. It really is, to start with a specific area and specific folks, and then leave the other folks, everybody else, your potential people, leave them out of the proposal unless you say something like, we're not going to turn anybody away, but we focus on these people in this area, right? Because these potential people, yes, they might one day need your services. But if you're not working with the whole world today, they're just potential. The funder's asking you about your primary people. And whenever you have an opportunity, the funder also wants to know a few more things. They don't want to just know that you're serving homeless people. They also want you to describe the characteristic of this population and the characteristic of the community that they come from, because they want to know, they want to understand, and they want to walk in your shoes so they can understand whether this is a good opportunity for them too. And so your target population section is super brief, but it's going to explain these things. And so This is an example of a target population statement. Our program targets homeless veteran men with minor children in DeKalb County, Georgia. Period. So if your funder is asking you to give a one sentence statement of who you serve, that is all you write. But if they ask you, and many times they will, to give more detail about the characteristic of the location and of the people that you serve, then you can bring in some more juicy nuggets. And you can talk about, with a total population of, DeKalb County is the third largest county in Georgia. The homeless population in DeKalb County is, the approximate number of homeless veterans with children are, the median household income is. I want you all to catch this one thing. We stayed on topic. We didn't just go and throw out demographics in the, for our area that have nothing to do with what we're writing about. We didn't say, oh, and DeKalb County has some beautiful botanical gardens. That's probably true, but it isn't on point. And so if we're talking about homelessness, then all of our demographics around our target population is going to be demographics that tie in somehow. Like I could have even said the number of people in poverty, because that ties in. So we want to make sure that everything flows and that everything ties in. And so the quick rule of thumb for our target population is that we're going to address the characteristic of the population that we serve. And we're also going to address the characteristic of the geographical location. And whenever we have time, we'll toss in some, or opportunity, we'll toss in some other relevant information. Target population. And now we're going to head on into SMART goals. We're going to put our thinking caps on for this one. This section of the proposal and of grant applications usually is the section that we massage a lot, you guys, because the funders might ask you to talk to them about your chief aim or what your plans are or your objectives. They're very rarely, I came across it very recently where somebody did say, tell us your SMART goals, but I usually don't see SMART goals written. However, this is what they want. They want your goals to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and they want them to be time bound. Now, when we look at the SMART goal and we break that down, usually, if you came up when I came, things change in school, but I always came up thinking, knowing that goals happen after the life of the grant. So that just means that I have a goal to house 12 people. I don't know that I've achieved that goal in January. I'm going to know in December when I'm done with the project. Objectives are what happened during the life of the grant. And I just wanted to explain that we know that, right? Inherently, we know that. We've learned that. However, funders use these terms interchangeably. So if you see these, this is what they mean, period. They're going to want you to be specific. Tell what, how much, and by when. They want you to get right down to it. And remember, a SMART goal is one sentence. So you've got to do all this in a sentence. So they want you to tell them what, how much, by when. It's got to be measurable. That's the M. And measurable just means that data can be collected on what it is that you're doing. They've got to be able to measure it. And then achievable, possible even for you. And this isn't a slight to you. This means even for me too. And let me give you an example. If I were to right now write a proposal for myself to house homeless people, that would, by December, that would probably not be achievable for me right now. Not that I couldn't do it. I'd have to stop life and as I know it and redo some things, get some partners. But achievable means for you, do you have the capacity? Do you have the partnerships? Do you have the know-how? Do you have the ingredients that's necessary for you to execute? So if this isn't a personal experience, if you're not starting a homeless, keeping with the homeless shelter example, if you're not starting a homeless shelter because you have been homeless, you've gotten through it and you want to walk other people through this path, or B, you have the education, human services background, you worked in homeless shelters, meaning you got the experience too, or that you're not partnered with lots of people in and around this area that can help you achieve this mission. So when we say achievable and possible, we mean, do you have the capacity? Can you prove that? And then is it relevant to the mission? So the R is relevant, and I added to the mission. because there might be some really great relevant goals that you have for your organization, but if it doesn't tie into the mission, then it should not be a goal that you give to a founder or a potential funder. And as an example, I remember writing a proposal for an organization last year, maybe the year before, and they were an organization for education. And this organization had some really lofty things that they were doing and goals tied to it. Well, at the very last second, they asked me if I would include a goal for the board members to take a retreat. And I just said, absolutely not. We can't do that. That's a personal goal for you all to do. It has nothing to do with you traveling around the world, educating folks in the workplace. It has nothing to do with that. And so you've got to make sure that if you present a goal to a funder, that it's a goal that's tied to the mission and to the project that you're asking to get funded. It's got to fit with your overall everything, pretty much. And it's got to be timed. You don't want to have a goal that says one day we're going to help the homeless. That's not a goal. That's your idea. Funders have people that they're stakeholders that they're committed to too. They also have to create reports and report on how they've spent money. They have to do that. And usually they have their own fiscal years and they like to have that money spent within that year. Occasionally you'll have a funder that'll say to you, it is okay to submit a multi-year proposal. That is very rare, first of all. But if it does happen, what they're going to then ask you is to break down those years. What's going to happen in year one versus what's going to happen in year two. And so what they're essentially asking you is, give us your time. Give us a finite time on when these things are going to be done. And so that is very, very important. And so here's an example of what that might look like. Remember, we said one sentence. All of what we just described, one sentence. To provide housing for up to 24 homeless adult men and their minor children by December 31st, 2021. That literally is our SMART goal. And let me show you how. We're going to break this down. We're going to break that sentence down so that I can show you that you can do this in one sentence. Very concise. It's not messy. It doesn't go on for a paragraph, because sometimes when you ask somebody to give you one sentence and they know they have one sentence, they'll keep putting commas and things in there. That doesn't count. Okay, so SMART goal planning. We know that our SMART goal is going to be specific, meaning that it's going to tell exactly what we plan to accomplish. It's going to be measurable, meaning that we're going to be able to see or show how we're going to meet that goal. It's going to be attainable, and that means, is it possible for even us to do it? Is it relevant? Is this a goal worth working hard to accomplish? And then lastly, is it timely? So let's have a look at our SMART goal once again. Our goal is to provide housing for up to 24 homeless adult men and their minor children during our fiscal year, January 1 through December 31, 2021. Now, is this SMART? Let's look. Is it measurable? Is it attainable? Well, let's start from the top. If we are going to look at specific, and that's supposed to tell exactly what we're going to do, we have it. We did it. So we are specifically going to provide housing. Next, is it measurable? Yes, it is. We are saying here that we're going to be able to provide housing for up to 24 homeless adult men and their minor children. That's something we can definitely count. Is it attainable? Well, let's take a look. Is this really attainable? Now, we said before that attainable is really an internal decision that you're going to make. You're going to have to prove it later on with capacity. But right now, is this a service that you provide? Are you partnered with relevant agencies that provide this? Can you accomplish this goal with the tools and resources that you currently have in your arsenal or through partnerships? And so you're going to need to answer that question. Is it relevant? Well, we're talking about housing. So we know that housing is a basic human need. And so in this case, yes, this is a very relevant goal. It is worth working hard for. And then lastly, is it timely? Well, yes, we said that we're going to accomplish this goal by December 31st, 2021. And so we have hit all of the key points here. We've checked every box. This goal is a SMART goal. So your rule of thumb for your project goals is that they should always be SMART, and they should be in alignment with your mission, and they're based on your project description. You can't have a goal that you didn't talk about in your project description. So if you're talking about what the project is going to do, then that's where the goals come from, not from any other area. And so we're progressing right now pretty good. We're going into evidence that the program succeeded or failed, and you provide that evidence in your evaluation. Now, there's two types of evaluation. There is process evaluation, and that's where you're demonstrating that activities were implemented as intended, meaning you did what you said you were going to do. You had deliverables, you delivered. And then there's outcome evaluation, where there's a change in knowledge, skills, and or behavior. And we're going to talk about both of these, but I want to just say, I think it's a really good idea to focus on both, to focus on the things you say you're going to do, and also focus on the outcome and impact that you have on the people that you've served. And so with process evaluation, you see that checklist. We're pretty much checking off boxes. There's indicators that we succeeded. Did we deliver? An example of a process evaluation would be the number of homeless families with minor children. So if somebody asks you, a funder asks you in a funding application to give them your indicators of success or your evaluation, then you'll say, I'm going to evaluate myself looking at the number of homeless people that we served. So process is always numeric, some shape or form. It can be percentage too, but it's always having something to do with something you can definitely measure. Outcome evaluation is totally different. Outcome evaluation is like, that's the so what. You got to tell this, you've got to ask yourself this. When you are done with your goals and you're done completing your project description, you've got to be able to say to yourself right in the mirror, so what? What does this all mean? What are we trying to accomplish here? Your outcome evaluation measures your long-term results or program impact. And so you guys might be thinking, well, Cheryl, I don't know what my long-term, they're only in this program for 16 weeks, or I'm only looking at this for 1 year. Then that's the reason why you did the research. The whole proposal is based on a thoroughly planned, researched project. And if you've done that, then you already know that if you help somebody to find a job, they're going to what? Earn income. And if they earn income, what are they going to be? Chances are they're going to be self-sufficient. And so we're going to assume that if you do those steps, that you're going to have the impact that you're looking for. And here's an example of an outcome evaluation statement. As a result of completing our program, homeless men gain the skills necessary to secure employment, leading to financial self-sufficiency. That's an outcome statement. And I see that question coming in. I promise I'm going to get to you, and I'll come back to the slide if we have to. But that's an outcome statement there. And so you want to make sure that your outcome evaluation is looking at the so what. What happened as a result of us housing these men? Yes, we did that, but now what? Let me tell you why this is important. This is what many funders are looking for now. A long time ago, when I first started writing, funders would ask you to commit to serving a certain number of people and doing a certain number of things. If you did that, that was always okay. Whew, they did it. Check. But now they don't want to have to pay for the same group of people over and over and over again. And so now they're asking, show us that we're not going to waste our money here. What's going to be the outcome? Are these people going to return? Are they going to be on your caseload or in your program forever and always? Or because you did this, did something change where now we can move on to the next people who need us? And so that's why this one is really, really important. And so your quick rule of thumb for evaluation is that it's got to be connected to your goals. Remember, whatever your goal is, then we need to measure that, and then we're going to evaluate, well, did it happen, and what's the outcome? It should serve as your indicator for success, whether your program is succeeding or failing at what it is that you said that you were going to do. And it also helps you to measure your impact. Super important to get this evaluation piece right. Your sustainability. Now, I've always been of the frame of mind. See, my mother was one of those people who said that money is a dignified conversation to have, right? She would always tell us that money is a dignified conversation to have. And so you will have this conversation when you're applying for funding, trust me. Now, a part of that conversation is continuation plans, AKA sustainability. A funder's going to want to know what happens when the money runs out or if you're not funded at all. And you've got to be prepared to answer that question because I can tell you it's almost in every application now. And so, what they're really asking you is how will the program sustain itself when the funding has been depleted? Will the organization advance the program if funding is not awarded? Oh my God, that's a big one. And I'm seeing it a lot. And sometimes we think, well, tell them no, tell them that we need the program, the funding so bad that if they don't fund us we can't do it. Well, that may have worked 1970, 1980, even in the early 90s. That doesn't work now. Funders aren't venture capitalists and they're not interested in being the only pumpkin in the patch. They want to know that you are going to be able to thrive with or without them. And I want to tell you, as a grant writer, and I don't know a single grant writer that likes this question, because we wouldn't be writing the grant if we didn't need the money, right? Period. And so I could never understand why that question was asked. We're a funder now. We don't ask that question because but you can't tell them that you won't be able to sustain yourself because then you won't get this funding. And so sustainability boils down to just a few things. We're going to just make this big old giant statement something that's very, very manageable. You want to explain the organization's investment in the project. And what that means is that what is your organization contributing? And not just your time. They're also looking for you to contribute some money. You're a nonprofit. And if most funders feel like if you're not contributing and, donating to your own nonprofit, why are you asking us? So you want to be able to have some skin in the game and show that you and your board are also contributing to the investment in this project. You'll list all the other funding sources and commitments that you have. And I can already hear you. I don't have any yet. I'm getting started. And I will say, yes, you do. You just don't know that yet. And so let's talk about that. Before you submit an application for any one funder, you've already done your research on several funders. You've already identified ABC Foundation, EFG Foundation. You've already identified some other foundations that you're going to apply for. And so what you do is list them, but list them as a pending request. That does a couple of things for you. It helps the funder know that there's potentially other people that's going to support this grant, this project, but it also lets them know that you did your homework, that you are a planner, and that you are likely fiscally responsible because you've done this. And if you've got any individuals that you think, even if they haven't given you the $10 right now, if you've got somebody, your friends, your family, your neighbors, your peers, who you think in the next funding period, which if you're going into 2021, you cannot tell me that in 12 months, you cannot find 12 people to give you $100 in 12 months. So that's $1,200 that you can list under individual contributions. And you can list it today. Guess why? Because you'll list it as pending request or pending commitment. That's what you'll do. And then you'll work to get that $100 every single month from somebody for the whole year. And so you see, you do have funding sources. Your sustainability plan, your quick rule of thumb is that you're going to state what the board will contribute. You're going to list your prospective funding. We talked about that. And that you're never, ever, ever going to state that the program's going to close without funding. And so let me give you an example of what that might look like. And I probably should have had a slide for this. But if you get that question, what you'll say is you'll say something like this. Should this funding request be denied or reduced, we may have to eliminate some certain positions, reduce some of our staff, increase our volunteers. We may have to request fees for our services, but we will not abandon our chief goals. You've got to be very, very direct and tell a funder, we might make some allowances and make some changes, but what we won't do is close. And so that's what they want to hear. Now we're moving on to budget. And so with your budget, budgets are usually two parts. And the basic budget is two parts. The budget is made up of your income and your expenses. And these are just certain categories of income and expenses that you guys could have. Not that you guys will have all of these, but I just wanted to list for you some possibilities. A possibility for income is certainly grants. That's why we're taking this class. contributions, and the contribution can be corporate contribution. It could be board well, we got that at the bottom, and it could be individual contributions. Contracts, you may decide that you want to secure a contract with an organization. I remember a long time ago, and it feels like a long time ago, before the pandemic, there were a lot of nonprofits that would get contracts to go and sell food at ball games. They did that on a regular basis, and they bring in quite a bit of money. That's a small contract, but you might get large contracts, a state, a local government contract, whatever contract you get. There might be fee for services. You may decide to charge program fees because it's appropriate in your nonprofit. There's in kind. Word about in kind here. You can definitely state that you received X number of food boxes, that it's an equivalent to $1,000 for the program year. But you're going to have to also state under your expenses that you received or that you need $1,000 in food, so that when that $1,000 can balance out from the income section to the expense section. So you can list in kind, but it's got to be represented somewhere in the expense section too. And then there's fundraising. Always like to see fundraising there. I like to see it. Funders like to see it. You should like to see it, because there's opportunity for fundraising every month. We've got classes on this, so you guys have to take other classes with us. But so fundraising should be definitely listed under your income. You want to bring in something. And remember, even if today you don't know exactly what you'll do for fundraising, before you, or as you're putting your budget together, you and your group, you and your board, if that's who's putting this budget together, then you all powwow on some things that you could do and what you anticipate bringing in from the fundraising activity. And you want to make sure you represent that income in your budget. And then your board contribution, never, ever, ever, ever have that say zero. It's got to be something, you guys. And then so under the expense section, these are just some customary expenses that we typically see. Your salaries, if you have salary already. If you don't, then don't list salaries. Your rent and utilities, if you're renting a building or some place that you're renting. And so fundraising fees, well, we cannot put fundraising under income without putting fundraising under expenses, because chances are it costs something, even if it's a few dollars to get something going, but usually it's a few hundred, could be a few thousand, depending on what you're doing. But you also want to show your fundraising fees. And if your fundraising fees are super nominal and you don't want to include them, tell you what, do it anyway. And here's the reason. If you put in income and you don't put in like it's zero or it's $1 or it's $10, because you pretty much can do this for almost free, say that, just so that your budget makes sense and funders understand that you are able to accomplish this with no money or little money at all. Professional fees, and then there's travel, supplies and equipment, there's marketing. There is literally list and list and list. I just named some of the things that you will probably find in your budget. With a budget, it's usually best to start off by creating your budget in Excel. It works for most of us to do that, because then you don't have to worry about making a mistake in terms of adding up your total revenue, your total expenses, and you can manipulate it a lot. And you can also cut and paste Excel into Word if you like to do that. But your revenue always comes first. Your revenue or your income's at the top of the Excel spreadsheet, and then your income and your expenses are always after your revenues. Revenues should always be equal to or greater than your expenses. In no circumstance should you create a potential budget where you're already at a deficit. That tells a funder that you're not a planner and you're not fiscally responsible. Now, if you get to the end of the year and you are deficit by whatever because some unexpected expense happened that you didn't account for, that makes more sense to me. But it does not make sense to go ahead and say that your expenses are 100,000 and your revenue is 90,000. Doesn't make sense. So you don't want to do that. And the way you compensate for the revenue that you don't have is, remember, we did the pre-work. We've got other funders that we're going to put in here, and we'll just put requesting, right? And let me give you an example. That's the equal to or greater than of expenses. Let me give you an example of what that might look like. And so if you look at this Excel spreadsheet, and you've got these are all fictitious numbers, you guys, but you've got government grant, foundation grant, corporate contributions. You've got some things going on here. And then you're requesting 17,000, rent 12,000, and supplies 5,000. So if you're submitting this budget to a funder, you could do it this way. But you could also put on this side requesting. You can also say requesting and who else you're requesting things from. That is perfectly acceptable to do that. In this case, you're sending this budget to a particular funder and they can see that you're requesting this money from them. They can see that you've got a budget of $127,250 and that you are not asking them for $127,250, that you're asking them for a mere $17,000 to help fund your project. They can also see that you are accounting for a surplus, which is wonderful, that you are accounting for planning for 132,000, which means you're going to have a surplus at the end of the year, which means that even if something that you didn't anticipate happening happens, that you've got a little bit of a buffer. And you'll note over in this section that we've got some details. And so what is that about? Anytime you have an opportunity, and I mean anytime, you want to give more information about what your organization is doing, even though you're requesting this from a particular funder, you don't want to be tempted to only tell them about what you're requesting from them, excuse me. You want them to know what's going on in your organization. Tell them that you've got one full-time employee at $35,000 and one part-time employee. Let them know that this is what your staff is and this is what you're paying for fringe. Fringe just means like your payroll fees and FICA, things like that. Let them know that you're covered. You've got legal coverage and you've got an accountant. Tell them these important things. Let them know that you've got your general liability insurance and your directors and officers insurance that cost you $3,500, but you're not asking them for it. Be very specific, because you can't be there in person when they're reviewing your budget. Now, if you get an opportunity for an interview, meaning they're interested in funding you, trust me, you're going to have that budget ready and have explanation ready too. But it's very helpful just to give them the information up front so that you are answering questions that you can't be there personally to answer. And let me tell you why that's important. This was a while ago now, so this may be about 2 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago. We wrote for a organization, and this was the budget that we submitted. And so you can see how we started small. Even though they were thinking big, they had another budget that included more salary, more this, more that. But the initial budget, we kept very, very skeletal, just the bare necessities of things that needed to happen. Up here, you can see that we said that the executive director, there was going to be one that was paid, but not until the fourth quarter. And so the executive director, although they would earn more than 6,000 for the year, they would only earn 6,000 every 3 months, right? And so we talked about what the payroll would be. Payroll, that 450 is the FICA that you pay, 7.65% of salary. Then we talked about the fundraising fee. And in this case, we said grant writer, that was true. But we could also have said whatever else we were doing in terms of fundraising, the rent. And so the program was really just getting off the ground toward the end of the year. So they were able to be in their this location for a little bit before they had to start paying rent. And so we said when the rent would start, and you can see the things that we did in here. Now, this was sent to a funder who immediately sent back a check for $5,000. And I'm not even kidding you. This is not an exaggeration. Before the ink was dry on this budget. And the reason was because we told the funder, this was for domestic violence. And we told the funder that these kiddies, they also need help. I mean, they're out there, they're victims too. And so we wanted to give them some comfort kits that would be provided to them. And we broke it down. We said they're going to get a stuffed animal, a coloring book, crayons, whistle. Yeah, that whistle's important. They might need that whistle, a toothbrush. And so the funder figured, well, everything in here is about victim, the adult victim, which we knew could get funded. Now, we didn't know that this could get funded. So this funder stepped out and gave us $5,000 immediately, you guys. And so that's the importance of literally breaking down what exactly these line items mean, because otherwise, if we had just wrote children comfort kit 5,000 and this whole other side wasn't there, funder would have no idea what that meant. Help them make a good decision regarding you. And make sure these numbers come from someplace. The $1,250 for 200 comfy kits, let me tell you, I went online and literally researched, what can we get the stuffed animals for? How much are these coloring books? Crayons, 50 cents, and we came up with, there's an average of $12.50. Okay, 200 of them is $5,000. And so these were real numbers. So they've got to be real numbers. These funders, they know this business better than you. I will tell you what, while you're just coming out the gate and getting started, they've been doing this, and they look at these applications every single day. They already know what these costs are even before you send them. So if you try to send something like a pencil costs $1 million, they're going to know that, and you'll be declined. And so quick rule of thumb for your budget is that it's got to be based on the project or services that you actually are doing, not things that, that you're not doing and you're not considering doing, but would be fun, right? Base them on something tangible. Be actual in those costs that you estimate. Always reflect that your income is equal to or greater than your expenses. And I personally prefer greater than. With your appendix, almost always you're going to ask or be asked to include a copy of your IRS determination letter, copy of your board list, a copy of the people that are contributing. And remember, don't get intimidated with this because you can still list those donors that you are expecting to contribute. Please do that. That's important. And then they're usually going to want a copy of your budget. Sometimes, and I should really put more frequently than ever, because I'm constantly seeing financial statements and IRS 990s being requested. And because of the social unrest we've experienced in this past year, I'm also seeing that people are wanting to see your anti-discrimination policy, and strategic plan is rare, but I'm seeing that sometimes as well. And so there you have it, you guys, in a nutshell, your proposal and the things that you should include. Now, you've done all these things, and your question should be, to me, well, why don't they get approved? Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about exactly why. And so there's a couple of categories. First of all, if guidelines aren't followed. So what I mean by that is you were not mission aligned in the first place. This funder was giving money. It looked very attractive. You wanted to fit the program into what they said they were doing, but you were not mission aligned. And they found that out because they went to your Facebook, they went to your website. They literally investigated you outside of your application and understood that you were not mission aligned with them in the first place. The deadline wasn't met. They said that you need to have this application in by December 31st. You turned it in on January 1. And even though it was great, they didn't read it. And so you didn't get that opportunity. You didn't adhere to the character count. They asked for a full proposal and told you that you had a character count limit of 250 per answer and a word count of 40 words. And you just talked as much as you wanted because you had some things you wanted to convey. If you don't adhere to the character count, they won't read it. And some of them are now saying that. Some of them are now saying anything over the character count, I have read this, y'all, this is real, we won't read. And so that means that they're only going to read half of your statement. So you want to make sure you adhere to that. It's incomplete. There were questions that you didn't understand, and so you just didn't fill out those questions. You moved on to the next one. And so those are some of the reasons the guidelines aren't followed. But it can also be your clarity. It could also be that it was poor literature review, right? You didn't do a needs statement that had facts and research behind it. Your methodology was weak or missing. They asked you to tell them about the program, and you just said, we're a homeless shelter. And then you went to the next question. You didn't give them the step-by-step day in the life of. You failed to demonstrate capacity. Remember that, is it relevant? So you said you wanted, let's say me, I said I wanted to create this homeless shelter, but I don't have any partners. I've never been homeless. I don't work in a homeless shelter, and human services is in my education. I just want to do it. I think that I should be able to do something. So I'm not demonstrating that I have the capacity to execute this program effectively. It's unrealistic budget. You wanted the money, and so you went ahead and you fluffed up some of the numbers just so that you can get a little bit extra. That happens. Oh my God, you guys, I used to review these things and you'd be surprised. And so, but there's other reasons. Let's say that you did follow the guidelines. It was written very, very well. Then what other reasons? Well, financially, your financials weren't accurate or inaccurate. And so that just means that you had financials put together, but nothing added up. Nothing. Like your financial statements did not match any of the things that you said you did in your budget categories. None of these things matched up. You have a cost that's greater than the benefit. I can't make these things up, you guys. I promise you. I had a person come to me to GrantWrite, and they wanted $100,000 to serve 10 people. I'm going to pause there and let that just digest. You've got to have a cost that meets your benefit. It just does. If it doesn't, then it's not advantageous for the funder to fund you. It's highly competitive. You can do all these things right, but now you're competing with everybody else. And who's everybody else? The IRS is still approving over 6,000 nonprofits every month. They approve about 90,000 new nonprofits every year. And so you're competing with everybody else who wants funding just like you do. So you've got to get out there and on a regular basis and not give up. And last but certainly not least, is the funder just ran out of funds. Now, we've seen that a lot during the pandemic, but let me say this happens, it would happen to some of our clients even before the pandemic, and there was no way for us to know because funders don't always post that on their website. They've gotten a lot better at it this year, and I think because of the pandemic and they're receiving so many applications. But sometimes the funder, they accept applications on a rolling basis. Rolling just means that they will continue to accept an application until they run out of money. And if they say that they don't have a deadline, so sometimes you'll see a funder and you'll look at the deadline area and it'll say no deadline. That means like 24/7, we review every quarter. Well, if they're out of money in June, people who are applying from July to December are not going to get funded. And they don't always tell you that they've run out of money. We've had that happen where one pretty sizable funder came back to say, we loved the proposal. Please reapply next year, but we don't have any more money. And I thought, oh my God, of all the reasons to get denied, at least they told us, that truth. And so recycle your proposal. Nothing goes to waste. Success means that you're receiving at least 1 in 20 grants funded. Now, I'm not saying this is what you have to do. I'm just saying that if you get on that roll where every time you submit 21 gets approved, that's success. It will take you time to build up to that. Okay. And you will build up to that if you keep at this. If you are rejected, that doesn't always mean your idea or your plan was rejected. It just means that at this time, that particular funder doesn't have capacity to fund you. It can mean other things too, but usually rejection could just mean that. When that happens and you are rejected, because it's inevitable that you're going to get some no's, right? Well, obtain your reviewer comments if there's any. Call them if you have an opportunity to thank them for reviewing. And then before you resubmit, and trust and believe you should be resubmitting when you have the opportunity, just to make sure that you call them ahead of time. They say that when you call a funder to say, hey, listen, I just want you to know I applied last time round and we weren't awarded, but we feel very strongly that we're mission aligned. So we're going to do it again. I'm sending this application. If you wouldn't mind taking a peek and just making sure that this is what you guys are looking for. So they might say yes or no, but it doesn't matter what they say. The purpose of that call, well, I mean, it does matter. If they say you're not mission aligned, don't apply. But if they say yes, obviously you do. But the purpose of the call, the real purpose is to get this another touch, to get yourself in front of them where they remember you when that application comes across their desk again. And so there are grant writing templates that are out there. Now, I've mentioned that we are grant writers. If you're on this call, you already know that. But if you don't want to use us and you want to do this on your own, yay, because I think you can do it. I would say go to npguides.org because they do offer free templates. And just know that you're going to have to massage it quite a bit. Follow the directions that we wrote in here because what we talked about in this training course, these are grants that get approved. Suffice it to say. So just making sure that even if you get a template, circle back to what you've learned here today, just to make sure that you're tying up all, loose ends. And then there are free funding databases. There's so many of them. If you have not already completed our resource guide survey that we have on our website, please do that because a lot of them are listed in there. But these are some of the free funding databases that you can go to. Grant Gopher is listed there because I like them a lot. They are free, but they're also a paid service too, as well as the Foundation Center. They offer quick start, but they also offer subscription. I'm talking about the free side. The reason that I've got the Grantsmanship Center listed there is because if you go to their website, you can identify your community foundation because they are a funder and they want to know that you exist. And you can also identify the top corporate funders in your state. Now, they'll also list the top foundations. Those are easy to find. The top corporations that give, they're not so easy to find. And the Grantsmanship Center will give you that list for your state. And so that's the reason that they are listed there. Now, you go and you use the grant databases, you will get yourself a nice list of people you can apply for. But here's the tip I've got. Before you apply, get the guidelines, guys, please. Read those guidelines. And last but certainly not least, y'all know what's coming. Follow those guidelines because that's going to be your saving grace. If you don't get funded, it's not going to be because you didn't do these things. And so I want to leave you with this. And this poem comes from John Whittier. I love this poem. If you've never heard of it, it's one of my faves. It's called Don't Quit. And here it goes. When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debt is high, when you want to smile but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. Life is queer with its twists and turns, as every one of us sometimes learns, and many a failure turns about when he might have won had he stuck it out. Don't give up, though the pace seems slow. You may succeed with another blow. Success is failure turned inside out, the silver tint of the clouds of doubt. And you never can tell how close you are. It may be near when it seems so far. So stick to the fight when your heart is hit. It's when things seem worse that you must not quit. I love that because gosh, life is hard sometimes, isn't it? But don't give up. And sometimes we give up because we think we might fail. And this is the reason we've got this little Winnie the Pooh. What if I fail? But oh, my darling, what if you fly? And that's what I feel about you guys. You have all the tools and pieces necessary to absolutely fly. Keep sharpening the saw. Hopefully, with us, we offer so many different trainings, more than we can fit on this slide. I love training. I love you guys. I always say that the best gift is you. Thank you so much for joining us for this training today.